How did you get signed? Who was the phone call from? Can you take us through like actually
Uh,
getting signed?
well, I did a bunch of camps first. I did
Camps.
a Ricky Morton, Bobby Eaton camp. I did the Dory Funk Dojo twice. I did a Ricky Steamboat camp. I
Oh
did an
wow.
ECW dojo. These were all like weekend or week long
Hmm.
camps that we would do. Because even Danny would tell me, he's like, you're not going to learn everything from me. And Danny had only, he's an excellent worker, but he had only really been an extra on television, an enhancement guy, enhancement talent on television. But um, so he would bring in these talents to, you know, to
Right.
help his talents kind of get, and he'd had some success out of it. Lita had went through that school. Orlando Jordan had gone through that school. He'd had a fair amount of people get signed out of that school. So, but it was really more just once I got there and I had to relearn a lot of stuff. I had to relearn like that I was just doing it wrong from my previous school and just being green and people who weren't ready, teaching people who weren't even close to ready, just all the
Right.
things that happen. Um, so those camps really, really helped me out a lot. And then I was working for, I had done the first TNA pay per view. And then I was working for Ring of Honor. I got into Ring of Honor when they first opened up and started running. And out of that, I started, and I was talking to Dr. Tom at the time. Dr. Tom was my point person, and I would email Dr. Tom, bless his heart, every other week, and I would send him a new tape at least once a month, and with my promo packet of please watch my tape, let me know what I'm doing wrong, what can I do. And then I would ask him, I was like, anytime you guys are in the vicinity or it's driving to, I mean, I was driving to Nashville from Virginia, which is 10 plus hours, for $25. So I was grateful if I would
Yeah.
just get a tryout. And a lot of times the women, you only got paid for a tryout if you actually wrestled. It wasn't like if you showed up, you got money for showing up. Like I feel like that's kind of how it is now, but you had to actually physically do something on the show to collect a paycheck from WWE at the time. So a lot of my tryouts, which I probably did about 50 of them, were not paid. I think one was paid because I wrestled Dawn Marie, and that was actually the match that I ended up, I think, was the catalyst of me getting hired from. But it was me. I was working with TNA regularly at the time, and they were only doing month to month contracts. So in between that month, when I would be unsigned for a couple weeks or a week, um, then I would get to do a tryout in between. So it's kind of in that space. But it was because of Raven. Raven saw me at Ring of Honor when he was working with CM Punk and they were doing like some dog collar match or something crazy like that. If I can sit under, I'm still sponging, if I can sit underneath the learning tree of Raven and learn through osmosis from him, and plus he's working this angle with Jeff Jarrett and I can learn from Jeff. And it was just an incredible opportunity. So I said yes, even though goth is not my realm. Like I had to buy everything from Hot Topic and figure out how to do this goth character. Um, but yeah, and that was when I got signed with WWE, and I was supposed to go to Japan for 3 months because my TNA contract was up. And they were just switching over to where they were going to sign talent for year-long contracts. So it was doing month to month, and then they did like a 3 month contract, and then they did a year contract. So they just gotten to that place where they were going to start signing talent to a year long deal. And I'd also had this opportunity to go to Japan at a female dojo for like 3 months. And I remember talking to Dr. Tom about it. And he then, I think this was when Johnny Ace first came into that position in talent relations. And Johnny Ace was actually the one who called me right before my birthday. It was like August 27th or some weird. I just remember because it was like my birthday was going
Yeah.
that weekend. And he's like, hey, we want to give you a deal. Oh boy, I want to go to Japan, but I also want to keep my teeth. It was Johnny Ace who called me. JR was still head of talent relations at the time, but Johnny had just kind of stepped in that position. And I remember they goes, yeah, we want to sign you $500 a week and you can move down to Louisville. And I was like, oh, okay. When do I have to move? And $500 a week it wasn't great, but it was as much, if not more, than I was making on the indies for being a weekend warrior. And I just couldn't work at Olive Garden anymore, at the truck stop anymore. So, but yeah, he gave me a couple months to wrap up all the rest of my the dates that he signed off of, which was like the Ring of Honor date, the MCW Maryland dates, and certain dates that I could wrap up. And then I had to be down there by October. And that's what I
Wow.
did. Yeah.
Well, that's wild. So we don't do research here at Lila Studios. Rip, you should have probably smarted me up on this. I guess I didn't even realize you were in TNA before that you got developmental. I probably should have known that.
I was the first woman ever, which I was green as grass, the first woman ever in the Clockwork Orange House of Fun match, which was with Jeff Jarrett. And it was myself and Julio De Niro. And yeah, that was
that's awesome.
Yeah,
so
it's
and then you
wild.
went with Raven. So we just had Nova, Mike Bucci, Simon
okay.
D on the other day, and he kind of got his in with Raven as well. He told us. So
yeah,
did you ever cross paths with him there at ECW, or was that a different time period?
I had one tryout in
that was
like
just at one time.
2000.
Okay.
Well, it was a couple. But I remember with ECW, and obviously ECW was on the way kind of out. And I was originally the intention was to sign me as Beulah's little sister. Tommy Dreamer has told me this story, so this is the only reason why. I remember my tryout being terrified, realizing I wasn't even close to ready. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea about etiquette backstage because I was still with Kaida at the time, so I'd only been wrestling like a year and a half. No business getting a tryout. And I, especially on the etiquette side, I just had no idea. And that wasn't something that was truly really taught, besides the handshake thing. Wasn't really taught at our school. But I learned that as I transferred up to Maryland and stuff. So, yeah, I took like 50 DDTs. I always say 200, but 50 DDTs in a row from Mikey Whipwreck. And I remember Paul was sitting there and Tommy sitting there, but they wanted me to be Beulah McGillicuddy's little sister who was just under 18, and apparently there was going to be a countdown clock of the days until I turn 18, like throughout the show, throughout television and then obviously you know how ECW does.
Yeah, big gold and a billfold, so swole that I can't get the shit closed. So I money fold and rubber band wrap, and when it pop, bitches sound like a hand clap.